Hey guys, my name's Nick. I'm a Microsoft Certified Expert Administrator. Create a lot of content for MSPs, and in today's video, it's part of a little mini series I created to show you some of the device configuration profiles for iOS. This video is specifically going to go over the device restrictions for iOS. It's pretty lengthy just because of all the settings available here, so I did break it up as far as the other profile types goes, and we're going to be strictly focusing on the restrictions today. So getting into it here, wanted to pop into the Endpoint Manager Admin Center here. Like I said in the previous video for device features, if you haven't checked out the videos I've made about iOS enrollment options, I would highly encourage you to check those out because they are applicable to some of the settings that you'll see here in the sense of being able to apply them or not to BYOD devices or devices that are company owned that you enroll through Apple Business Manager, for instance. So getting into it here, we have the device configuration profiles tab up. I got there by going to devices, iOS, and then configuration profiles. I've already set these up here just to show you, and I have a couple of demo videos for some of them from the end user standpoint, which is why I pre-made them. But we'll be going through the restriction setting here. And under the restriction setting, if you go to create this, you'll see the same blades as I am seeing now. This is the main one here. So we're going to go through each one of these tabs. I'm going to tell you each one of these settings and what it means. For the most part, keep in mind here, the two that I'm not going to cover as part of this video is anything to do with Apple School Manager or any of the classroom settings. I'm just not going to cover that here. And also the kiosk settings as well too. So I may cover those in a separate video. If you guys are looking for that kind of content, you can go ahead and just stop watching now, because I'm only going to cover the settings that are available with Apple Business Manager or BYOD devices. So getting into it with the configuration settings, general here, I'll go through each one. What I mentioned in the last video that you should take note of here is always look at what this is applicable to in the sense of enrollment type. So this will tell you whether or not it applies to all device enrollment or automated device enrollment or just automated device enrollment. So it goes by most cumbersome in the sense of the width of devices that will be applicable to the settings, and then narrows down to the most granular in the sense that you would have to have them enrolled in the automated device enrollment program through Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager here to be able to apply these certain settings. So pay attention to that. Also, if you click over these little icons here, they typically tell you if there is iOS version settings, minimum version. They'll tell them either at the top here or if you hover over the little icon as well too. So with the general one, share usage data is just saying that you can share usage data with Apple for their telemetry. You could block that if you really wanted to. Screen capture prevents the screenshots and also screen recording on the device, so you could block that as well too if you wanted. This again is for device enrollment and automated device enrollment. So untrusted TLS certificates, you could upload one into Intune if you wanted to as a trusted certificate as another profile type and block all others if you really wanted to. So that's why this setting would be here available. So you would use both at the same time. Block over air PKI updates. This is something where the device would have to be plugged into a Mac, for instance, in order to receive software updates. So this may be something that you want to do, but typically in the space of MSPs, I do not consider it to be that case. Limit ad tracking. This is more of a consideration for customers you have under GDPR requirements or privacy requirements like CCPA in California, where you might want to limit the ad tracking from certain applications that are on the device. Enterprise App Trust here, you can set this to block. If you do not set it to block, it could, people can download untrusted applications outside of the Apple Store onto the device. So you may want to just restrict that to trusted developers if you're an enterprise level company or if you've hired somebody outside to develop a proprietary app. Or if you are not worried about that and you want them to allow them to be able to download from outside the Apple Store as well too. So these are the ones for only automated device enrollment. Diagnostics mission settings modification, you could block this. You can see this if you go into certain applications on the iOS device itself. It says something about sharing usage data at the app level, and you can either toggle that on or off as an end user of that device. But you as the administrator here, corporate owned, you could block them from modifying that so that the app itself cannot collect data. The company portal app is a clear example. If you guys want to see one, you can download that, look in the settings section of the iOS device, and you'll be able to see the data usage there toggled on where it's collecting data. The classroom app, like I mentioned, I'm not going to modify or touch on those, so I'm going to skip over those. Account modification, this is simply saying that they can add another profile to the account or anything like that. They can add another user name to the account, things like that, another Apple ID to the account where you could block them from doing so here. Screen time, this is something where if you're familiar with the screen time app, you could limit your time across multiple applications if you really wanted to, or track them. You could block them from doing so. Use of the erase all content and settings option on the device. This is something that you can do remotely as the admin, so you may want to block them from doing so, especially this is more for security in the sense that it's lost or stolen. You could block that person from potentially wiping the device and taking it over new for themselves and using or selling, for instance. Device name modification, this is straightforward. They can't rename the device name. Typically you want it pretty uniform structure to stay organized and understand what that is beyond maybe a serial number that you're using to track it. So notification setting modification here is pretty straightforward. You can choose whether or not applications push notifications into the iOS device. If you watched my last video on device features, you know that if it is also a managed device with ABM, you can also configure what applications can deliver notifications as well. And you could block them from modifying your settings there as well too. That would automatically turn them back on in the sense of having device features profile configured. Next here we have wallpaper modification. So again, pretty straightforward there. They can't modify the wallpaper at all if you set that out and pre-configured your own logo to be on part of that. Configuration profile changes. This is basically blocking any changes to the profile that you pushed out as well too in the sense of the MDM profile. Activation lock, you could block or allow in this case as well too. So with activation lock, it's turned on automatically whenever somebody uses the Find My Device section and activates that. And basically it was made so that it's more difficult to sell or reuse a device that's lost or stolen. If somebody picks up that device, it's immediately going to go into a state where they have to type in, and its activation lock is turned on as well too with Find My Device. It's turned into a state where they have to type in their Apple ID or password, that users, in order to unlock the device. So you can allow that if you really wanted to, but it's a personal preference, right? So you could allow that and say that they can turn on activation lock with Find My Device, and you can completely stop them from using Find My Device too if you really wanted to. So that's more of a personal preference to you. Block app removal. This could simply say that you're pushing out your own custom corporate applications and you don't want them to remove any of the applications that are actually on the device. Allow USB accessories while the device is locked. This is specifically around security settings in the sense of the device being hacked. So if you're familiar with boxes like GrayKey, for instance, where it's used to hack into the device if it's lost or stolen, typically it's not recommended that you allow this. And this is saying that you can't allow USB accessories while the device is locked for more than an hour. And so the user would have to type in authentication again in order for them to remain getting that authentication or the USB device being connected into the device itself. So I would typically recommend that you don't allow this unless the only use case I see is if it's like a kiosk level device within your company in the organization. Force automatic date and time, pretty straightforward there, just updates if it transports across different time zones. Require students to request permission to leave classroom. These ones here, again, I'm not going to cover as part of the classroom settings. Block VPN creation. With Intune here, you can create a VPN configuration profile and push that out so they have a trusted VPN already pre-configured, and you want to block them from creating another one on there to some other network somewhere or personal network. Modifying the eSIM settings basically just prevents users from going ahead and adding another cellular plan to the device. So typically, if you are in control of the cellular plan, you might want to block that so they don't tamper with that. And then lastly, here in this section, we have defer software updates. You can enable it up to 90 days here. It's got defaulted to 30 if you do enable it, but you can customize it anywhere from 1 to 90 days as well. So this is something where if you have this set up here, you may have applications that are proprietary that would potentially break with software updates that you need to defer in order to update your own internal application. Is really the most common use case, but if not, you could delay these as well too if you really wanted to delay the software updates. Otherwise, you would leave it and they would just update automatically. So that was a lot for the first section there. So like I said, it's pretty detailed, but I wanted to show you guys all the settings here. So next one we have is password. So again, similar format. Always pay attention to the enrollment methods that are applicable for each setting. So we want to require password, obviously, and this is where we can get into the password settings. So we can block simple passwords. We can require numeric or alphanumeric characters. Typically in iOS, you're going to do numeric because that's what users are familiar with. And number of non-alphanumeric characters in the password. If you're doing numeric, then typically you don't want to set that as well too. Minimum password length here. The max you can do in an iOS device is 6. So even if I put 8 here, it's going to say that it's not applicable if I put 8 and push this out to the device. Otherwise, if their device today is a 4-digit device and I update it to 6, then they will be prompted to go ahead and immediately update their password to 6 digits instead of 4. But in the sense of 8, it's not going to be applicable. The maximum you can set here is 6. So the number of sign-in failures before wiping the device, that's extreme setting there that you really want to pay attention to in the sense of enabling it all. So if there is something where if it wipes the device completely, you want to know that you can get it back up and running pretty quickly again if it is an accident. But I would be really careful about that one if it's personal users messing with it. This is more in the sense, I would say, with the corporate devices that are in-house, maybe a kiosk device as well too. Maximum minutes after screen lock before password is required immediately is a good recommendation, but you can configure this as well too to anything you want as far as those settings go. Maximum minutes of inactivity until screen locks, 1 minute. You can configure this up to 15 minutes and decide what this is. If you're falling under HIPAA regulations or any other type of regulation, recommend these settings here. Just because you're having a complex password, you're requiring passwords upon reactivation, and there's a timely lockout of the screen as well too for re-authentication. So meets some of the controls there and a lot of different compliance requirements. Expiration days, up to you there. Not typical on an iOS device, but you can set that up. And you can prevent their use of passwords. So you could say you can't use this password for 3 times. You have to create new passwords for 3 times before you can use it again. Touch ID and Face ID to unlock. You could block that if you really wanted to, but typically if it's a end user device that you're using, it's a more secure way of authenticating to the device, so you wouldn't really want to do that. Again, these are for automated device enrollment. This is blocking them from modifying the passcode, so you could set that up in the front and they can change it over time. We're moving towards a passwordless authentication environment, or passwords that never expire. Just been shown in studies to be more secure over time from the fact that we have to keep up with so many passwords. They're shared in a secure manner over unmanaged channels. And this is a good one if you want to say that you can't modify your password to something else that we've set as a company. Touch ID and Face ID modification, you can block that as well too. Block password autofill, block password proximity requests. This is a lot like handoff if you're familiar with that one, and that basically allows them to transfer information and data across their managed devices, like between their Mac and their iOS device. Problem I see and why you might want to block this one is if you're managing the iOS device but you're not managing their Mac. They could be transferring data back and forth to an unmanaged device there that you cannot remotely wipe. So that would be a case where you wouldn't want that. But in this sense, it's proximity request as well too, where they're getting the password from keychain on a Mac, for instance. Block password sharing. This is again available with 12 or later, and this is something that isn't going to be something that you want to allow if you don't want them to share passwords back and forth. Require Touch ID or Face ID authentication for full password or credit card information autofill. If it's a company device and you have your own company credit card, absolutely require that every time. But it's a general practice. It's good to require this to authenticate transactions anyway on the device. Lock screen experience here. Let me just minimize this one. So with this one, this involves all enrollment types, but you can control what somebody sees on the lock screen. So the control center, notification center, and today view. These are all things that you can see when the device is locked. The only considerations here I would say is if there's any PII that would be sourced that is available on the home screen, unlocked or locked, I would say in this case. So this is something where you may want to block it if they are getting notifications where that it does contain certain sensitive information that you wouldn't want anybody to see if it was lost or stolen. Device enrollment and automated device enrollment here. Wallet notifications while the device is locked. Again, you can block this as well too for heightened security with that. App Store, dock viewing, and gaming. These are a little bit more granular in the sense of getting into the weeds a little bit. But first settings here, again, all enrollment types. You can view corporate documents and unmanaged applications. I want to go ahead and block that. This is separate from Intune's app protection policies, but this is if the device is enrolled. You can also do the same in the sense of not allowing them to open up a Word doc, for instance, in Google Drive or Google Doc, as an example, or something like that. And then this one is more of a, I've seen it on both sides, allow unmanaged apps to read from managed contacts accounts. So this is saying you can pull in applications into managed corporate applications, like your Outlook, for instance. You could pull in your contacts from the iPhone into this device as well too. If it's corporate owned, it's probably not that big of a deal, but if it's BYOD, this is more so where it gets kind of in the weeds in the sense of, do you want to do that or not, and start having these people potentially pull up as contacts that they would maybe mistakenly send information to that's sensitive, or just having those contacts in their account there. Treat AirDrop as an unmanaged destination. This is something where you could require that as well too, so that they can't start airdropping corporate documents into other iPhones as well too, and that would block them from doing so. Viewing non-corporate documents in corporate apps. Typically, I like to block that as well too. If you're going to block the allow unmanaged apps to read from managed contacts, or sorry, the view corporate documents on unmanaged apps, I would do the same, vice versa. So non-corporate documents in corporate apps. Generally, you want to separate that data as best you can. You can still do so because everything that they have as a corporate app will be in OneDrive, but I would recommend that they have those separated. But you could configure this if you want to consistently view that. So it's a personal preference. You may want to say that I want, my Gmail account. If it's BYOD, this completely changes 180 in my opinion. If it's BYOD, then I don't want to block that. I want to say that you can open a Word doc in Word application, and you won't have the ability to not do so because it's managed by my corporation in that sense, if it's enrolled in the MDM solution. So device enrollment and automated device enrollment here. Require the iTunes Store password for all purchases. Really straightforward. You have to put in a password there for an iCloud account to download anything from the iTunes Store. In-app purchases, they can block them from doing so if you don't want them to be doing that on the device. Download content from iBook Store flagged as erotica. Again, just a personal preference there. Allow managed apps to write contacts to unmanaged contacts accounts. So this is more so again between BYOD and between corporate owned. Maybe you don't want them, if it's BYOD, writing their managed apps to write the contacts into the unmanaged contacts accounts. So again, you may want to do that there. So for the ratings region down here, you can select the rating region you want to allow for downloads. In a lot of cases, it's going to be United States, but again, you don't have to configure this if you don't want to. Automated device enrollment here. This is again for just ones with ABM or Apple School Manager. You can block the App Store, you can block installing apps, automatic app downloads, explicit iTunes music, podcast, or news content, adding Game Center friends, Game Center, multiplayer gaming, access to network drive, and Files app. This is the only one I want to cover. This is otherwise pretty straightforward. This one here, if you're not familiar with the Files app there, it does allow you to connect to an outside network drive or file share if you have it set up with server message block protocol enabled. So you could disable this if you didn't want them connecting to an outside FTP server or network share or something like that. Next here we have Builtin Apps. And with Builtin Apps here, these are pretty straightforward. If you're familiar with iOS devices at all, you're familiar with the major applications that are pre-built and loaded onto the device when you boot it up. So Siri, you could block Siri while the device is locked, and you can require Siri fraud warnings if they're using the Safari app on the iOS device itself. For these settings here, you can block Spotlight search return results from the internet. You could choose how long or if you're going to allow or block cookies from trusted websites or current websites, and allow or block those. Safari JavaScript you could block, Safari pop-ups you can block, and then these are only for the managed devices here with Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager. But they do allow you to block these already defined applications that are on the device, like Find My Phone, My Friends, the bookstore, FaceTime, camera, and all that. So again, this would be a very unique use case of which you're meeting certain requirements for the customer, but there's nothing in here that is really going to be a specific example of why you would want to block all these. Potentially, it's because it's a kiosk device where you want to use it in a single app mode, which I'll show you here in a second. But you have settings to do that automatically without going through that. So for the next two here, restricted apps and show or hide apps, I wanted to cover together just because there's a clear distinction there. So with the restricted apps section, users aren't blocked from downloading prohibited apps that you set within here. They are able to still download them. But with the show or hide apps, this actually blocks any other app that you don't define there. So it's kind of like whitelisting and blocking all others. While restricted is just giving you notifications in the sense of people downloading prohibited applications or approved apps as well too. So this is specifically just notifying, and you can say prohibited or approved. So in either case, again, they're not blocked from downloading prohibited apps, but they will inform Intune. You will get a notification about it, so you know that they downloaded something that you consider to be prohibited, and you can take action on it. Otherwise, the approved apps as well too will go ahead and they'll be able to download those, and if it's not on a list of approved apps, you'll be informed as well too. So maybe you're not uniquely defining obviously every single prohibited or approved app, but you would be notified in either case if it's not one of the approved apps or if it's a prohibited app that you've specified, and you can take action accordingly. Show or hide apps here, this is where I was saying you could have hidden or visible. So with visible, this would then say these are the only list of apps that I allow you to see or download ever, and I'm not going to allow you to view or download anything else. So it's basically whitelisting all that they can see for life. And then hidden apps you can hide as well too if you want to hide some of the native applications. Honestly, if you're going to do that though, I would just go into the built-in apps and block some of those. You can hide them altogether though, so that users don't get confused and even click in there and see that they can't access and get frustrated. They just won't even have it available. So a couple different settings there. You can customize how you see fit. Wireless here, you can prevent, again, this is more so if you are managing the device, and you have the control over their voice plan as well too from a telephone provider, and you want to restrict some of the data roaming capabilities, voice dialing, voice roaming, or personal hotspot as well too. You could block that if you really wanted to do so. And this is for device enrollment and automated device enrollment. So this is pretty sensitive in the sense that you could do this for the device that are enrolled via the Apple School Manager, Apple Business Manager. It's more so if they're traveling internationally or in a space where there isn't much coverage. It's not going into that extended coverage as well there too, and they can't roam with the data. So I would think this would align with you having the plan for them as well too, in which they're paying for the monthly voice services too. But you can block the use of cellular data and the data when they're roaming as well too. And then for automated device enrollment, you have the ability to block these changes to app cellular data usage settings, cellular plan settings, modification to personal hotspot, and then join Wi-Fi networks only using configuration profiles. This is if you've set up a Wi-Fi configuration profile for iOS and push it out. And maybe this is a use case where you have the devices in-house on your network in a physical location, and they're only joining that ever. So it just makes it easy, one, for the device to go ahead and automatically get configured once it's turned on if you've provisioned that. And then also, there's no confusion on adding another network that could be malicious or unsecure. Wi-Fi always turned on, you could require that as well too, so that they can't turn that off on the device. Again, I consider those to be more settings for devices you always have in-house. Connected devices here. This one is pretty straightforward in a lot of senses, where you're looking at the risk detection for paired Apple Watch, if that's a consideration. Require AirPlay outgoing request pairing password. Require that as well too. AirDrop you could block. You could block Apple Watch pairing, Bluetooth modification, AirPrint, host pairing to control devices on iOS can pair with, storage of AirPrint credentials and keychain. So all of these here, I'm not gonna read them to you, but you can see that you can granularly control all the settings and features on the device itself. The only ones that I want to point out here is you could access files on USB drive. You might want to disable that just for heightened security if they are connecting to outside devices. Keyboard and dictionary. This one's again very straightforward, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time, but you can read through these. These are basically allowing you to modify what they can type. Predictive keyboards and auto correction are really straightforward. You could block those if you really wanted to. And then quick path is when you're swiping your finger across the keyboard, and it's creating the words for you based off that. So this may be something where it's a personal preference of the company that says, hey, I don't want auto correction on these managed devices, and you say, okay, well, we can block that across the board. So really granular in that sense. iCloud and storage, this is a good one for DLP purposes here. So you can encrypt, have encrypted backup on the device. You can have managed apps that are syncing to the cloud. You can block those. And this is basically going to prevent them from syncing corporate application data to an untrusted personal Apple ID iCloud account. You can, again, if it depends really, right? If it's a BYOD device that may have a personal Apple ID of which they're backing up to iCloud, or it could be just a corporate-owned device, which you have managed Apple IDs and you're backing up to your corporate iCloud account, which is completely fine because you manage that still. So keep that in mind. Block enterprise book backup. This is something that you can publish ebooks within Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager, and push them up or out to the account. But you can also, obviously, as an end user, go ahead and download books to the account as well too. And you can have your enterprise books and that you wouldn't want to back up to the iCloud account either. And the same thing with the metadata sync here as well. So for these settings here, you can block photo stream syncing to the cloud, iCloud photo library, share photo stream, and handoff. Again, handoff is the one where you're able to transfer data back and forth between an iOS device and Mac device. One may be managed, one may not be, so you want to pay attention to that. And with these settings here, I mean, again, it really comes down to if you're managing the device or not, and if it's a corporate-owned device, maybe you don't want them syncing this up to the photo library. I would say it's black and white, in my opinion, in these settings, in the sense of either there's a personal Apple ID on the account or it's a managed Apple ID. So that's really the delineation there. And if it is user enrollment, which is in preview right now for the device enrollment method, it does separate out managed Apple ID versus personal Apple ID and managed corporate data at the application level. So it backs it up to the iCloud storage on the managed Apple ID account if it is something where it's corporate data that they're accessing. So in that case, you wouldn't want to block all these from backing it up, because that's another method of doing so. Otherwise, you may just be backing this up yourself with a third-party SaaS provider, which typically you're going to be doing. So I would keep that in mind, but maybe some of you are using iCloud as well to back things up too for iOS devices. Automated device enrollment, you can block the iCloud backup, you can block iCloud document sync and keychain sync. Same settings you would see on a Mac device as well too. So again, personal preference with those. Autonomous single app mode, this is what I was referring to earlier. If you want to restrict everything on the device to one app when it's launched, typically, like it's saying here, this is a device where once the app is launched, it's like a testing app where you're taking that test and you're preventing them from accessing any other resources to prevent cheating or any other malicious type of activity while the test is occurring, and then it returns back to its normal state where you have access to every other application, maybe just as the administrator in that case. Kiosk mode, again, I touched on the fact that I'm not going to go into all those settings there. They're pretty unique and you have to turn on for the device. There's a lot of them here, but they're pretty straightforward. I just didn't want to get into it here. And then domains, you can whitelist domains here. Every other domain would be marked as untrusted, like it's showing here, if they're getting email to that in the native mail client. And then you have managed web domains. These are website URLs you can whitelist here, and they'll be considered managed in Safari. And so anything that you download there will not go through the fraud prevention filter, I guess you would say, in the sense of what Safari has on that device. So there's a couple of websites you could whitelist here, in the sense of maybe they're just the SharePoint URLs that you have in the company, or OneDrive URLs potentially, but you can do that here as well too. And then for the automated device enrollment, you have the ability to say these domain URLs have autofill domains, and you're saying that, like it's saying here. So with the Safari password autofill domains, you're basically saying they can only save passwords for these particular URLs on the device. So it's, again, pretty hard requirements here. Supervised mode, not configured for multiple users, and iOS 19.3 or greater. But these are the ones where, again, you can whitelist URLs where they can save the passwords there, but no other passwords can be saved. So pretty unique use cases there. So that's all the settings, guys, that I wanted to go through. I know it was a lot. This is a longer video just because of all the pre-configured settings. The last thing I'll leave you with here is, after you do push this out and assign it to users there or devices, you can uniquely tag them. I would recommend that for the devices you know will be BYOD iOS devices or the ones that are managed by the company. So you're only applying it to those devices and maybe just tagging them as iOS. So you can scope it accordingly and have it organized that way. But then once it's enrolled here, you can always come under the device configuration tab under any device. And you can see here, I have the restrictions iOS policy that I created there. I can click on it and I can see which of these have succeeded, which are pending, and which have failed. And this may be a case where the password wasn't up to date. Like they have a 4-digit password and I said you have to have at least 6. And so maybe they're in the process of updating that, because the iOS device does go through and say, hey, you need to update your password to meet the company's requirements, and it'll take you through that process of updating that. Otherwise, if these things are pre-configured of how you set them, they'll go into the succeeded status here. And then this minimum password length you see is not applicable, and that's where I was touching on before, where I was saying that the maximum password length that you can create is 6 characters, and I put in 8. So it's saying it's not applicable because the password on the phone was already 6 characters long, and you said 8, so it doesn't really matter. They've already got their minimum requirements met. So that's everything I wanted to show you guys. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, please like or subscribe to the channel. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.